and they see it coming. They're already positioned. Warren Buffett's got, or not Warren Buffett anymore because he's no longer CEO. Berkshire Hathaway has $373 billion sat on the sidelines in cash and cash equivalents across multiple currencies. That is enough to buy 480 out of the 500 companies in the S&P 500.
Jake, legend, how are you doing today?
Blessed, brother. Appreciate you having me on.
Welcome, welcome. When I heard that you were going to be on, I got so excited. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. What should I wear? Should I wear some really good threads?
You look
or
really
what?
nice. I'm falling short on the mark today.
Awesome. First of all, thank you for meeting me. I'm excited. Before we dive in, I'll just kind of go over a little bit of how the call is going to go. We're going to start a little bit with your background and share a little bit about the bigger picture on how your role fits in the company, because I know there's several moving parts that you have.
Yes.
And then we'll get into some of the main conversation, but it'll take about 30 to 40 minutes. Does this sound good to you?
It's great.
So I guess I kind of want to, well, first tell me a little bit about your background and what's happening today first.
Yeah. So, I don't know where to start. I went to school for finance. Didn't really ever use it. Had a short internship at Northwestern Mutual and hated it. Felt like a snake oil salesman selling insurance to my friends and family. But I knew I wanted to do something in finance. Took a hiatus from that for a long time. Went and worked in industrial sales, scaled multiple locations for Fastenal. Was acquired by another company to help them scale their corporation. Doubled their business in a year. They didn't come through on the equity or some of the comp that they told me that they were going to do. So I stepped away and got a certification through Value Builder to be able to, help other business owners scale, work with blue collar people just to, build infrastructure inside their business to make it more valuable so that they could exit to a VC or somebody else that was rolling up something in their industry. While I was doing that, I made some investments in crypto. Took the money that I was saving for my wife and I to buy a home and rolled it, and still haven't lived that down because we still haven't moved.
Right.
But we're working on it. So anyway, did really well. Took 13 positions. Well, first I didn't even get into crypto first. I went the traditional route. In 2020, when the stock market fell, I took 4 positions. I watched my dad miss American Airlines like a couple days before they were going to file bankruptcy and got bailed out in 2008.
Oh.
And so, I thought if I ever have the chance and there's a big fall in the stock market, I'm going to take advantage. And I did. Facebook, Amazon, Google, Tesla were the 4 that I picked. There were some other flyers and stuff that I traded in there, but for the most part, those were the positions, and did really well on those in a very short period of time. We had the rebound. I didn't get the bottom, but I was close. And about mid-year in 2020, I started to look to de-risk from the stock market because it was back at the same highs, PE ratios, Buffett indicator, all the stuff that had kind of kept me away from the stock market that I'd learned in school. And anyway, when I was looking to de-risk, I was watching a debate between Peter Schiff and a Bitcoin guy. And that's when it clicked for me what Bitcoin was and what cryptocurrency is and blockchain and smart contracts and these technologies, and how it was going to revolutionize finance. And so I dove in there and I took all the money I made in stocks and I rolled it into 13 positions in crypto. And I don't think I'm smarter than anybody else. I think it's just right time, right place, and did really well. And, my parents were well-to-do, but we never had a ton of money. Money was always a problem in our household. And so I then, at that point, had a lot more money than I had ever had in my life. And I really didn't know what to do or how to mitigate taxes or who I should talk to. It's not like I built a business and scaled it and had all these professionals around me that I had built up over decades. So I just started calling firms all across the US that said they dealt with crypto. And I whittled it down to 5 that I worked with to structure my estate and mitigate taxes and set things up. And then got on social media in 2022 and started talking about that stuff. And a couple of people were nice enough to make some intros to some family offices, started consulting for them. And then over the last 3 years, we've scaled out a full MFO. We're the largest by volume of clients and capital crypto-focused RIA in the world. and we do all the professional services that you'd expect from a multifamily office, estate planning, tax prep, all the things that you would get, private jets and concierge service, bill pay, bank accounts, international stuff. So uh, some of that's in-house, some of it's outsourced. Over time, we'll continue to bring things in, but it's been a wild ride for the
Right.
past 5 years, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down with the impending, regulation that we're going to see here in 2026 around crypto.
Yes, I'm excited to hear about that a little bit because I've been following you since February last year, and it's amazing of obviously the highs and lows. But the question I kind of have for you is, at what point did you decide, okay, I want to do something to help individuals that recently come into money or whatever? Like, when did you realize that that's what you were destined to do?
So I sat down and prayed in 2020 before I ever made the money. Um, Actually, before I had quit the other job, and there was a couple different times in my career where I felt like I had been wronged by people that had promised me things, and then they reneged on it. So anyway, I sat down and just did some soul searching, and I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always wanted to do things on my own, but there's a lot that goes along with that. That it's a lot of radical responsibility. You either sink or swim. Eat what you kill. And so, anyway, when I sat down and prayed, I didn't get the answers that I thought I was going to get. I was given, that I'm supposed to manage $10 trillion and sit on the board of the top 10 most progressive companies in the world. And to do that, I've got to help a lot of people, right? To become the person I need to be in order to fulfill on that. And when it came to me, and like I said, I was not expecting that when I sat down, but I wasn't the person I needed to be in order to fulfill on that. But I've held that in my mind for a long time and pray about it often. And, here we are 6 years later, and it seems like that's a possibility. I don't know that it'll be anytime soon,
Right.
but it's a lot more probable today than it's ever been.
That is
So,
awesome.
but I've always liked to help people. And again, it kind of goes back to the snake oil deal at Northwestern Mutual. I don't like. I've never been a a retail salesman. There's no way that I could do like used cars or anything like that. I don't like when I'm being sold or pressure sold or any of that. So I don't do that. I want people to have solutions to their problems. That was the whole thing that I did during my time when I worked at Fastenal, and really all I've ever done is, okay, what's your problem? Do I have something, or a recommendation or a product or a service or a connection where I can help you? And
Right.
I just do that. Whatever one of those things is, and even if it's not me and it's somebody else that does it better than me, I'll refer you to that person because I want you to have what you need at the end of the day. Fix your actual problem. Um, and so, after I experienced what I did, I thought, well, I'm not alone. Financial education is sparse in most households and also non-existent in schools. And so if I'm able to put together a community and provide some educational material and at least give people the right tools and resources to start learning this stuff for the ones that are interested, because you can lead a horse to water. Not everybody's going to drink
Right.
it, nor do they care. But for people that do want better for themselves and their family, if I'm able to provide resources at a really fair rate, because I've been a part of a lot of other communities where I've paid 3, 5, 10, 30, $50,000 a year to be a part of these communities, and people are well to do, which is great. You get some good connections and do a little bit of business, but I've never found a community where the person that founded it or the team of people that are working there are active on a daily basis in the community, helping people, answering questions, providing value, and creating solutions. And so that's what we've strove to do. And when I first started, it was a little Facebook group. I started making videos again after I sat down and prayed and was given that. I knew I needed social media presence. I hated the sound of my own voice. Anytime I ever heard myself on camera, I was like, this sounds horrible. Who's going to listen to me? And so I was like, well, I got to force myself to get good at this. So every morning when I got my truck, to either drive somewhere or take my kid to school. After I dropped him off, I would just make a 1 to 5 minute video on Facebook and post it. And in the beginning, nobody cared. Nobody listened to it.
Right.
1 or 2 likes. Um, and then, I met other people and they could see the passion that I had for what I was doing. And so we had a little Facebook group that had like 5 people in it. And then, when I met my business partner now, Max Avery, he had been a part of some other groups, and I said, "Hey, I want to start this mastermind." And at that point, I had a little bit of a following on Twitter. About 1,000 people would tune in on Saturdays, and every Saturday for 8 months, I just got on there and talked about how to mitigate taxes, structure your estate, thoughts on the market, macro, all the same stuff I talk about now. But cultivated a little following, and so I pitched everybody. I'd never asked them for anything. It was January 6th of 2023. And I'd ridden down with him, just got to know him a little bit. And he was kind of in a lull in his career. He had some businesses that were working for him, but wasn't super busy and looking for something. So I said, "Hey, you want to partner on this deal and try to build a community?" He said, "Sure." And he can build websites and he knows how to run marketing and SEO and all the stuff that I don't know how to do. And so, I got on there and said, "Hey, we don't have any product. I have no website. I have no nothing. Here's a Stripe link. If you believe in what we're doing and you think this is going to be cool, that's $25 and you're locked in for forever at $25 a month if you join now." And we had about 200 people that paid, the $25. And then I was like, "Oh no, like I have to actually do this now." There's
Right.
people that, care. So over the next couple of months, we built a website and a Discord, and the rest is history. It's, we were at about 18,000 members at the end of last year in the community. And really the ethos behind that community is I really do want to help 1 million people become financially free. I don't know that we'll ever have that many people in the community, but, hopefully transcending multiple generations and through, other relationships that they have, they can kind of pay it forward and we'll get to that, large number or esoteric goal at some point.
Nice, nice. Now, before I get into like what you're really doing today, because you got a lot of things happening, I want to know, was there a period of time where you almost quit? Like
Oh,
maybe, like can you give me an idea of maybe a little story of what might have happened and then what made you decide that no, I gotta move forward, I can do this or whatever.
I've cultivated a lot of grit in my life. I was a bodybuilder for the whole time I was doing sales. And if you've ever done that, it's 24/7, 365 commitment. It's super disciplined, can't miss meals. You're dieting or you're bulking. You're never comfortable. It's most people cannot do it. It's not a fun experience because if you're not uncomfortable, you're not changing your body
Right.
in either direction. If you're just holding steady, then it's not, you're not making progress. So there's been a lot of times where I've dieted on fish and air for weeks at a time, and felt horrible. And in those moments, or when I want to quit, there's been lots of times in my life where I've wanted to quit, whether it's this business or anything. I'm like, one more day. You can do one more day. Like just make it through today and get to tomorrow. And if you can do that, then you just take one step at a time. I don't know if you've ever heard Bill Ackman. He had his divorce and went lost $4 billion and all this stuff. And the same thing there, like just one day at a time. If you can make it through today, then, quit tomorrow, basically is the motto. There's been lots of times, over the past 4 or 5 years that run out of money and you got to make payroll,
Right.
you get sued by somebody and it wasn't what you were expecting. You really didn't do anything wrong, but there you see it as a money grab, right? Like there's always going to be things that happen in your life where you're don't expect them or you're caught off guard. There's lots of highs and lows in business too. Like there's been days where we've had fantastic announcements or partnerships or all these great things happening, and at the same time I want to quit because I'm so overwhelmed and so tired, and but I have all these people counting on me.
Right.
Like, you can't quit. There's not an option Like if you're an employee, like you can quit, right? You can go find another job. But like if you're a founder, if you own the business, if you are the one that people are betting on and they're literally betting their lives and their families, security on your ability to execute and continue to make payroll and build the business, there's not an option. You
Right.
don't get the luxury of rolling over and quitting. So, I think it's a rare person. I don't think that most people are cut out to be business owners. It is not fun most of the time. It's a lot of long hours. You give up the 9 to 5 so you can work 24/7.
Right. Exactly.
So anyway, that's my little trick. If I get in a bad spot, things aren't going our way, or there's a stretch of time where it's, you're down and out, you just one more day. I'll quit tomorrow.
Not on the investment side yet or anything like that, but if there was somebody young starting, wanting to do business, get started in any kind of business or whatever, what kind of advice would you have someone that, knowing that what you've gone through already, what kind of advice would you give someone just starting out?
Go learn from somebody that you want to, or you aspire to be like. Life is short, but it's also long. I look at my life in 4 phases, and I got this from Patrick Bet-David on Advent Valuetainment is his channel. So watch a lot of YouTube channels and learn. And you'll, Alex Hormozy and many other people don't sugarcoat stuff. Like they'll tell you how it really is to be a business owner. So you'll figure out if it's for you or not. But the 4 phases that I look at my life through are like the first 20 years, you just don't put yourself behind the 8 ball. Don't be in the car with the drugs. Don't have a child too early or put yourself at a disadvantage. And even I know people that have put themselves in those positions and still made it out fine. And they are business owners and they've been very successful. So not to say that it can't happen, but ideally you're not behind the 8 ball when you start. And then for the next 20 years, you want to set yourself up for financial success. And for me, financial freedom is you make twice as much money from passive income each month as your bills are. So dream big, decide, what you want your life to look like, how much that's actually going to cost, break it down, be like very detailed. Decide on the house, where you're going to live, the cars you're going to drive, the jet, whatever you want, where you're going to travel, all that stuff. I'm a big believer in manifesting and vision boards. I think that they absolutely work. They have worked for me for sure. So do that. But, like I said, I've been entrepreneurial my whole life. I started a little trash valet business when I was in college. I thought I wanted to do like a clothing brand for a while, and that kind of flopped. And you're not going to know what the thing is either. Like there's going to be a bunch of stuff that you try and start and probably flops and fails, and there'll be something that catches. You'll be in the market at the right time with the right idea and be able to capitalize on it if you stick around long enough. But me going to work for all of these other people, I learned how to manage other people and how I didn't like to be managed, and how to structure comp plans and equity and negotiate sales, marketing, payroll, dealing with vendors, accounts receivable, accounts payable, the accounting, taxes. There's all these things you have to deal with as a business owner, or have to hire people that are hopefully smarter than you to be able to handle those things. But you got to be able to make the money to pay them, right? So
Right.
sales is king. So if you could go work somewhere else under somebody else that you want to, or you aspire to be like, figure out how they did it for the next, call it 10 years, from 20 to 30. And then, somewhere between 30 and 40 is where I see most people kind of figure out what they want to do. I had a lot of pressure on myself in my 20s that, I needed to figure it out and I needed to know everything. And, I feel like I'm already a lot younger than most people are when they figure it out. I think I figured it out at about 29, what I actually wanted to do. Like I said,
Right.
that's when I sat down and, prayed about it and got those answers.
I'm still trying to find out what I want to do when I grow up.
Right. So all that being said, life is short and you need to take action. I call it being aggressively patient, right? So you're taking aggressive action every single day on what you know is eventually going to get you there, but you're going to have to be consistent for an extended period of time to actually get what you're looking for. So, you know, 10 years, it could be shorter or longer, you know, but during that period, you're going to get all the skills, traits, and beliefs you need to be successful in, you know, being an entrepreneur and getting equity in a firm or starting your own thing. Equity is the way to be able to generate wealth. If you don't own a piece of a business that you're participating in, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to retire extremely wealthy at the end of the day. Now, you might have a 401k and a pension plan, and there's plenty of people that do that, but it's a long road if you're going to go that way. It's a 30, 40-year trek. And I think with the way AI is going, things are going to be very different in the not too distant future. So, you know, from 30 to 40, figure out what that is for you, scale a business, participate in a business, get some equity, grow. And then, you know, hopefully by the time you're 40 or 50 years old, you're pretty well established on the finance side. You have enough of a nest egg. There's reoccurring revenue of some kind, passive income that supplements your lifestyle, and you can go travel or reinvent yourself or go back to the hobbies that you didn't get to do when you were a little bit younger, working on that financial freedom. And then, you know, somewhere between 50, 60, 70 years old and whenever you inevitably pass away, give back. And for a lot of people, that's, you know, philanthropic stuff, donating your money or your time or both, mentoring other people. Some people get into politics. Other people are professors. Other people run, you know, they become a preacher. There's all these different ways that you can give back and help people, but hopefully you've garnered enough wisdom and knowledge that you can then impart that and help other people kind of skip the potholes that you went through in your life. And then, you know, they get to stand on your shoulders and hopefully be more successful than you were. Right. So
Perfect.
That's my ethos. That's what I'm trying to do. And I don't know if that's for everybody, but I think that those are some pretty good rules, and the people I've seen execute on that have done pretty well.
No, I think that is great, great, great. So I don't want you to get into the micro and the macro yet, okay? But you mentioned AI a little bit, and I want to kind of find out like what trends have impacted your business and growth strategy, and how has AI either helped you or maybe hindered you in your business at this point?
We use it every single day. You know, LLMs are great for drafting sales copy or creating marketing material or drafting emails, legal review, all kinds of stuff. Ideation, I use it mostly for ideation. So I'll say, you know, if these variables are true or consistent, what's the outcome for this or that? And how can I use this or leverage this? And, you know, building AI agents, I think, is going to be a huge help. We haven't started doing that in our business yet or automating things, but we're looking at it. We just hired a new head of product that's going to be implementing AI at scale throughout our corporation.
Sweet.
You know, I think it helps augment your individual efficiency. So for me, what would have taken me hours to read and digest and then, you know, put together or rewrite or, you know, draft up, I can get that done in seconds. And so it frees me up to do stuff like this, right? I have a lot more time to be able to be on camera and create content and think about the business and the trajectory it's on and who are strategic partnerships or acquisitions or different things that we're looking at, products we need to bring to market, maybe review things and cut some stuff out of the business, you know, like be a lot more strategic with my time. And I think that's what AI will do at scale, is help people do the things that they're good at, their creative talents, and the automated, boring administrative tasks that take up a lot of time will just be automated. And you can do it in a way where it's running 24/7, 365. They don't get sick. There's no benefits. There's no days off. It just runs as long as you need it to go. So it should reduce costs substantially in businesses. And I think you're going to see, you know, there'll be $1 trillion business in the next 3 to 5 years that's got 3 or 4 employees. It's going to be wild the way that it completely changes the landscape as far as employment goes. But I think there's a huge advantage for people too. If they're, you know, on that trend and they figure out how to use these AI agents, you could become an agency that does that for people. Obviously, marketing agencies was a big thing for a while. And now I think AI implementation or blockchain implementation across businesses will be in vogue for a period of time until it's kind of democratized and you can vibe code it yourself. An agency to help you, and that's probably 6 to 8 months away. I think, you probably won't even need, but maybe one coder to just QC stuff if there are some issues. SaaS is going to be completely disintermediated. I think, everybody will be able to build whatever application you want, and it'll be bespoke to you and the features that you want it to have, and you won't have to pay recurring revenue models to other people on things. So it's just gonna be a very different paradigm. But we're leveraging that in a lot of different capacities, and there's many ways that we want to leverage it inside of our business to produce products and more services and create efficiencies for our clients.
Got it. So someone asked me this question, so I figure I'm gonna run it by you.
Gonna
Using
regift it.
AI, right? Using AI to try and predict the market
Oh,
on
it's garbage.
is it? So
Yeah.
give me your take on how if someone says I'm doing this or whatever, what would you tell them?
I mean, I see it in the comments on our social media every single day. They're like, well, Grok said, ChatGPT said, Claude said. Look, all of these models are based on last year's data and what's
Mhm.
available on the internet. They aren't even up to date.
Got
And
it.
if you did have one that was up to date, it's still, unless you build the thesis and explain it to the reason why certain outcomes are going to happen, it doesn't have the context. I mean, you could even tell it to, pretend it's Ray Dalio or Warren Buffett or one of these other, macroeconomists that have been very successful over extended periods of time. But it's not them, right? It doesn't have that wisdom or expertise or like their juice, right? Like they have had visceral, real experiences over extended periods of time that allow them to be able to discern which way the market's actually going to go when certain things happen and calculate all of the different variables that may be dynamic or consistent and how those are going to play into that situation. So, I mean, I've tried it myself, right? And I have a full thesis on how I think things are going to play out. And if I explain it to the AI, it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely the way it's going to go. But if I just ask it without any explanation or context, it gives me a completely different answer. And it's
Interesting.
also very probabilistic. Like AIs today or LLMs, they are primarily focused on like agreeing with you uh,
Right.
versus being deterministic, where they would actually go out and use logic to be able to identify things and come back to you with a legitimate answer and not hallucinations. So, it's getting much better. It's a lot better than it was 6 months ago. Um, and the government may have something that we don't have access to. If we have access to this tool, I would expect that the
Right.
government probably has something that's much better and trained specifically on certain data sets that actually allow it to be pretty accurate when predicting macroeconomic events. So that would be the only other way that I think you could probably get a good outcome is if you had, you know, a probably a doctorate or somebody had written a doctorate on macroeconomics in the current environment, and you put that in as the um, like background for that LLM to be able to reference and double check things, then you might get, much more accurate answers. But just, typing it into an obscure LLM
Right.
online, it's not going to give you a legitimate output.
Fair enough. I agree. That's nice. Again, I don't want to get in the micro macro yet, okay?
Okay.
Because I know people that's what people want to hear right this second. But based on you building what you're building, right? I want to see what shifts that you feel like you got to take because the industry might be taking some shifts, what trends are happening and maybe what's working well you think right now, or maybe what might be frustrating you at this time trying to get to where you're trying to go.
I mean, there's always bottlenecks on stuff, right? We've been really blessed that we haven't had a whole lot of churn for employees. People want to come work here. They see the vision. They're excited about it. We've continued to grow. I will say this though, 8% of the people that start with a company usually make it to IPO. So if you think about that, for a founder to go from a startup all the way to a public company and continue to be the CEO, it's very rare. You look at like Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg or Elon. There's a few that have done it, but the majority by far end up, being relegated to a board seat. They're no longer the CEO. They'll bring in somebody that's an executive or scaled large companies or managed a public company before. Few and far between. The other thing I would say is, we want to scale this to a multi-trillion-dollar asset manager, again, that's the vision I was given. So that's where I'm headed. To get there, there's a lot of things that have to be true. There's compliance, there's integrations and partnerships, and you got custody, and you've got, all of these investment banks and other counterparties that you have to deal with, insurance, and you got to be able to balance all those things and negotiate terms and not back down from your morals or principles when you're doing certain things, and things have to be done. I'm very particular about how I want things done. And the people that I've seen be very successful tend to be that way. They tend to be pretty meticulous about, like, some things they'll be like, I don't care how we get there, but there are certain nuances that they are sticklers for. And I'm that way too. But at the same time, you can't let that slow you down. I see a lot of people, allow perfect to be the roadblock to good, right? Like sometimes you just need to get an MVP to market. We just launched our beta for our app this morning to a few people. And I got in there first thing before everybody else and tried to use it. And what was supposed to be in prod was not. It was still in dev, and it had to be pushed. All right, so there's just little things like that. And again, not knocking anybody. Everybody's working their tails off, and sometimes things just get missed. And so, you got to go test things. But we got that to market, MVP, and it definitely doesn't have all the capabilities that we want it to have. And it's pretty, just a starting place is really what it ends up being. But we'll continue to be able to build on top of that and add additional features and scope and create more value for our client base. But I think a lot of people want to have the finished product before they launch anything, and that keeps them from ever launching anything. And then they also don't get feedback from the market. That's the other thing that I've found super valuable is clients tell you what they want.
Right.
But if you don't have anything for them to use or consume or participate in, you're not going to get that feedback. And sometimes it's honest feedback that you're going to get, and it might not be what you're wanting to hear, but it's what you need to hear in order to be able to get, a really good product or service to market. So, I worked with these business owners in 2020 and 21 to help them exit. And when you get to, 10, 20, $30 million in revenue, there's a hurdle there. And you have to be willing to give up some control and delegate things and build systems and SOPs and have hierarchy and structure in your corporation. And a lot of people aren't willing to go that way or do that. We've done really well to do that, and again, like I've watched other people not. And so I try to hire people that are smarter than me. Most of the time, I would say the majority of our staff is older than I am and more seasoned and has wisdom and has been other places and executed well. And we're looking for a better opportunity. And so we've been able to, garner some really good talent that we're going to be able to announce in the near future.
Sweet.
With some PR. But all that being said, every day is different. It's not like there's a fire every single day. There's not a day where and as the CEO, or I'm not longer a CEO, but I'm chairman. If it gets to me, like nobody else could solve the problem, right?
Right.
And I'm the backstop. So, if you are the founder, if you are the face, if you are the CEO, that's all you're going to deal with all day long. Is the biggest problem in the business, the most friction, the maddest client, whatever you got to deal with in order to move things forward. So, like I said, it's not just one thing, it's an amalgamation of things, but it's always changing, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Awesome. I'm a firm believer, you don't have to have it all figured out.
No.
You're going to figure it out.
Just start.
However,
Yeah.
my wife has accused me of that I'm always jumping off the cliff and trying to figure out my landing on the way down. Right. Exactly.
Guilty.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know where you want to go. What are you focusing on to try to get done in the next 6 to 12 months? And I know there's that ultimate goal of managing the money that you want to manage, but I think there are some more personal reasons that you want to help people for that ultimate goal. Can you kind of share us with us a little bit on that?
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about my dad, but before he passed away 4 years ago, it was really freeing to me in a lot of ways when my dad passed away, which is weird to say, but I really cared about what he thought. And toward the end of his life, I had to start like parenting him in some situations, which was really weird to parent your parent. Um, but all that being said, he was upset with the world. He didn't like the direction that it was going, and he, was upset about the data privacy rights and what Facebook and other large corporations have been doing. Also upset about politics and the direction, and the dollar no longer being the reserve currency and all these things. And so, he was telling me, you need to get off Facebook and you need to call your congressman. And I'm old enough to understand how the world really works. When you're young, or you think you have more power than you do a lot of the time. Not that people aren't powerful, they are, but at the same time, like, you have to be realistic with yourself on stuff. I didn't lobby for my congressman. He doesn't care what I have to say. I'm one
Right,
constituent,
right,
right? And same thing for Facebook. I'm one of their 3 billion users. So what? I delete
right,
my account, right? Like, unless you have enough influence to be able to affect millions of people, probably not going to get anywhere on either one of those objectives,
right,
right? Now, if you are a public figure and you have the ability to put out a tweet like Elon or, Trump and move markets, okay, now the
right.
congressmen are going to listen, right? So for me, that's my goal. I want a seat at the table. I want to be able to advocate for the average person. I felt the same way my dad does or did, and I still do. I feel like, the average person's not being looked out for, and there's nobody at the table to be able to do that. And so for me, that is the larger narrative, and what I'm trying to accomplish with building this is, the numbers are great, and like, you have to have, SMART goals. I don't know if you've seen that acronym, but like, legitimate numbers and timelines and all this stuff, metrics that you can track, if you're putting the goals together. Otherwise, it's just a dream. So, but I think your purpose you can work back from a purpose and put those things in place, and that's what this is for me. Is my purpose is to get a seat at the table so that I can actually affect change and benefit the average person.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's you ready? You want to get into the micro
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
macro?
Do the fun stuff.
Okay, let's do the fun stuff and we'll go from there. I'll let you start because you got to assume that some people don't know the reverse carry trade and all that. So I'll let you begin it and
Yeah, I'll try to keep it, understandable and high level for people. I have a biased outcome on where I think things are going to go. So just, again, take this with a grain of salt. Now, what I will say before I get into this is nothing here is financial advice. It's only for entertainment and educational purposes. Always speak with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. And Gene and I are not financial advisors, so you should not be taking our advice.
right.
Um, so, my thesis is, we're in a very odd time as far as macroeconomics goes. I've had a thesis for 2 years, and we're starting to see it play out here in 2026. Oil costs have gone up substantially because of the conflict there in Iran and them shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which I called about a year before it happened, which is wild, again, to even think about. But that came from Jim Rickards, who is one of the best macroeconomists that the U.S. government ever hired, and he's been running war games for decades, helping them figure out how to make sure that the dollar remained the global reserve currency. So, listening to him is where I got that insight from, that they would probably shut down a strait in order to be able to push oil up. And the reason that would be done would be to force Japan to have to raise interest rates. Japan's interest rates have been, low to even negative at some points over the past 25 years. Anybody and everybody that could borrow money from the Bank of Japan has, right? Like, if you could borrow yen at 0% interest and then swap it for dollars or euros or, another currency, and then put it to work in a market and earn a risk-free return of, call it 5%, 4% on free money, and you got enough money, that's a way to make a lot of money. And pension funds and sovereign wealth funds and Warren Buffett, you name it, they've all borrowed money from the Bank of Japan at some point in the past 25 years. That's a lot of leverage that's built into this system. Like the US stock market and all other markets have liquidity that's in them from the Bank of Japan that needs to be repaid at some point. And as long as interest rates are low, it's fine. Like they're zero. You can refinance it. It's not going to be a problem. But when that spread tightens and your returns truncate, now you're in a position where you're going to have to pull that liquidity out of these markets and repay those loans. Otherwise, you're upside down or you default, and then you're in bankruptcy and all the other problems you're going to have. So we're on the precipice of that. We've already seen Japan start to raise interest rates. They've had inflation in their economy. They have real GDP growth after almost 3 decades where they didn't. They're pulling themselves out of stagflation, which is great for their economy. But the problem is now we have all this leverage built into the system that's going to be unwound when they raise interest rates further than they already have. They're at 75 basis points. And many people at the Bank of Japan and also previous members of the Bank of Japan have said they need to be around 1.5%, around 150 basis points. So I think that they are likely going to move aggressively on the next move. And what that will do is it will unwind that leverage. And that is effectively the reverse carry trade that people talk about. It is where all of that leverage that's built into these markets will get sucked out, swap back to dollars or whatever currency is the base currency for that market, and then converted back to yen through the FX market to repay those loans. You've seen Warren Buffett, you've seen the Fed stockpiling yen because when this unwinds, they're going to need to be a lender in that situation because not everybody's going to be able to run through the FX market at the same time. And they see it coming. They're already positioned. Warren Buffett's got, or not Warren Buffett anymore because he's no longer CEO, Berkshire Hathaway has $373 billion sat on the sidelines in cash and cash equivalents across multiple currencies. That is enough to buy 480 out of the 500 companies in the S&P 500.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's like the most liquidity that's ever been on the sideline. That should probably tell you something. If the smartest people in the world are hoarding cash right now and sitting that in, dollar or other currency equivalents in treasuries that are liquid to be able to move when they need to, a lot of people are doing the same thing. A lot of very smart people see those signals and now they're hoarding cash and holding it on the sideline. So the velocity of money has come down to almost nothing. Velocity of money is how fast money moves across an economy. We're at the lowest speed of money moving across the economy that we've ever had in recorded history. We're also at the highest amount of money that's ever been in circulation in recorded history into money supply. So the two things that cause inflation are how much money there is in an economy and how fast it's moving. And the multiplier on that gives you the inflation rate. With technology, though, it's hugely deflationary. So you now have the advent of AI, like we just talked about a little bit earlier, compressing costs on things significantly and increasing efficiencies of production. And that's only going to get exacerbated. Like it's only going to get better. This is the worst AI is ever going to be today.
Right.
Right. And now you have the convergence of that with blockchain and biotech and all of these other progressive technologies that are also about to take hold. And so, I've watched people talk about a deflationary collapse or a hyperinflationary, melt up scenario. I think we're going to get both. And we've already got the hyperinflation point. They front ran all of this deflationary collapse that they saw coming and all of this liquidity getting pulled out of markets so that, it would kind of soften the blow when we have a repricing across asset classes. And I think that's inevitably what's going to happen. I think markets are going to correct, somewhere between 30 and 50% across the board. I don't think it's going to matter where you have your money. Oil, if you're in gold and silver, if you are in the stock market, if you're in commodities, crypto, real estate, all of it's coming down nominally. Now, in comparison to the currency themselves, if they shore those up, your real return is going to be different depending on which asset class you're in. This liquidity moving out of these markets and back to Japan is going to be a complete reset. It's tens of trillions of dollars all at one time that are going to move. And really the only way that the Fed can do anything at this point, because they have two levers. All central banks have two levers that they can pull. They can either lower M2 money supply or raise M2 money supply, print money, make the money printer go burr, or, which is what they've chosen to do for the most part for the past 5 years, or they can lower or raise interest rates. And lowering and raising interest rates is kind of a proxy for velocity of money because it encourages or disincentivizes spending in the economy. If you can refinance stuff at a lower interest rate, people feel wealthier. They take their money and they move it. They go do things with it. Whereas if they're raising interest rates, things are tightening. People hold off lending. Their lending standards tighten more because they've got to be able to generate more return, and it needs to be secure that they're going to be able to do that. So a lot of people are in a bad spot now. They've continued to take out leverage and kick the can and do things because they thought interest rates were going to come down. And now that we have inflation in the economy again because oil prices are up and energy costs are higher, the Fed's now talking about potentially raising interest rates. Not good. You already had all of these private credit funds start halting withdrawals and keeping people's money longer. And they have the right to do so. It's in their contracts. It's not like they're doing anything outside their bounds. But that is a canary in the coal mine that liquidity is not available and is not going to be available. And you're starting to see banks start to underwrite risk in a way where they're not lending out as much money. They're lowering lines of credit for businesses and other HELOCs and other things because they know this repricing is coming. The only way that I see out of this is to actually directly affect the velocity of money. And the only way they can do that is to move to distributed ledger technology and actually start settling things real time, both on the back end of the stock market, the FX market, and other large markets globally, SWIFT. And it also removes the inflation that's there or the cost for those money transfers. Right now, it's 2 to 3% on every single transaction that people pay through an economy that passes through MasterCard or Visa or some other payment processor. But if you move to these rails, you could reduce that cost by 90%, and they actually still would make more margin. And because the volume of payments would pick up, they would actually end up making more money than they do today. And so they're incentivized to adopt this. But there are a lot of incumbents that make money on float. And they're holding cash for whatever period of time to be able to settle, and they know that they can do that. And because of that, they are, a little bit hesitant to move this direction. But I think they're going to be forced to. Otherwise, we're going to move into a deflationary collapse and we won't have a way out. And there's going to be huge unrealized losses on balance sheets and a lot of problems. So I think that they're going to drive liquidity into XRP and use that as a back-end settlement mechanism to be able to de-risk the stock market when all of this unfolds. And people that are holding that probably end up doing pretty well.
Awesome. Man, I know some people are trying to wrap their heads around that, right? So I have one last question for you, Jake. And this question is more toward you or your business, however you want to set it up. If there was one thing that our listeners took from today, whether it's the only thing they heard or it's the last thing they remember, whatever, what would you want them to remember? What is important enough to you that you want them to take from this podcast today?
We've been over a lot of different things. I mean, whatever you're going to do in your life, whether that's if you're going to start your own business, you're going to work in another business, things are going to be hard. They're going to suck. It's not going to be fun for periods of time. You're likely going to have, if you are a business owner, euphoric highs and horrible lows during that time. So just know that that's what you're signing up for. And that's what hard feels like. And that's why most people don't have crazy outcomes or have the success that they're hopeful for, is they're not willing to endure the difficulties that are required to obtain it. And just because something's difficult to obtain doesn't mean it's worthwhile or worth having. But anything that is worthwhile in having, you will have to endure suffering in order to be able to, end up having it. So whether that's a physique or a business or, potentially your spouse, all those things require compromise and commitment and grit. The number one quality that they found for billionaires, irrespective of anything else, was grit and determination. They didn't quit. So just like you said, there's lots of times where you're going to want to quit. It's going to feel like the walls are closing in. Do you know who Jay Waller is?
Mhm.
Okay, so Jay, he talks about this time when he felt like he was going to go out of business. He didn't have the money to make payroll, and then he was hanging around some more successful men, and he felt some type of way about telling somebody. He's like, I got to talk to somebody about this. So he tells one of the other guys that he's looks up to and aspires to be like, and he just kind of slaps him on the back and says, well, if you don't feel like you're going to go out of business every 3 to 4 years, you're probably not doing anything anyway. And then they just go to the bar and have a drink, like, but that's the reality of the situation. If you're not stretching, if you're not doing those things, you're likely contracting and going out of business slowly, and you don't even realize it. So you're going to be uncomfortable either direction. Might as well be in growth.
Right.
So yeah, if I was going to leave people with something, that would be what I'd want to remember.
Jake, I think that was awesome. I really do appreciate you sharing your insights today. Um, I think everybody's going to be better off after they watch this. So thanks again. And also thank you for watching another episode of Revenue Playbook Chronicles. And I got this one from Jake, and I'll see you on the next one.